commandment he adds is simply to love one another. When Jesus gets to write the law, when Jesus gets to pass the statute, when Jesus gets to make the decision, he decides this is what I want to add to the commands you've already got. Listen, we've got enough laws and regulations, making sure that your behavior is nice and trying to legislate your morality. He says that what I'm going to add is love one another. That's what I'm concerned with. Jesus says, my new command is love one another just like I loved you. John chapter 13, and let's look at verses 34 and 35. And this is how it reads. Text says, a new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another. As I have loved you, that ye also love one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. I love that text. I'm going to read just a little bit of it again. A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another. My brothers and my sisters, this morning, as we look at this portion of the Gospel of John, we are confronted with what the writer terms as a new commandment. New commandment. When you hear that terminology, if you are familiar with the Hebrew Bible, some call it the Hebrew Bible, some call it the Old Testament. If you're familiar with that first half of your Christian scriptures, you know that throughout Genesis through Malachi, there are many commandments, there are many encouragements, there are many admonitions that we are given from God, many things that we're asked and told to do. Commandments are a part of our faith. I know that we often don't like to think about commandments too much because we like the idea of a free-flowing faith. We like the idea of being kind of independent, especially this week is Independence Day weekend. And so as Americans, many of us are acknowledging this reality that on the 4th of July, there was this Declaration of Independence that was signed here in the States, whereby the individual states who had been colonies declared that they were now independent from British rule, and that they were now an independent nation of states. And we like to think of ourselves as independent, of not being under anybody's thumb, of not having to do anything. If y'all grew up like me, you remember the old saying, ain't got to do nothing but stay black and die. One of my favorite movies popularized that saying, but it's one that was in the culture long before that movie. I don't have to do anything but stay black. And that we love this idea of being independent, of being in charge of our own selves, of not having to answer to anybody. But here, Jesus says, I give you a new commandment. He's laying on top of those commandments that we've already received. If you're familiar, again, with the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, you know at least about those 10 commandments that are called the Decalogue in Hebrew studies. Those 10 laws, rules that were given on the 2 tablets from Moses that come down from the lawgiver who goes up to see God. And when he goes up there, God gives the law on those tablets. And when Moses comes down, he breaks the tablets in anger, but the law still stands. You're familiar with those 10 commandments. If nothing else, you've seen the Charlton Heston movie as a child. And then on top of those 10 commandments, we also have hundreds of other commands that come up out of the relationship that the Hebrew people, the Israelites, the Jewish people have with God throughout Genesis to Malachi. There are many commandments that we get as the people are trying to figure out what it means to be the people of God in the land of God and living life God's way. If we're going to live God's way, there are just some commands we are to adhere to. The reality is that no matter how much we want to believe that we are free and independent, that we do have some rules and regulations that guide the way we live. As a matter of fact, it's not just in our religious life, but even in our individual everyday lives, in our interpersonal relationships, we have rules of engagement, ways that we deal with one another. We have ways that we talk to the people we love. There are certain ways that we're going to do things. We have certain things that we will not do and will do on the job because of the regulations and commands in the employee handbook. There are things we're not going to do in the street because we don't want a police officer haul us off to jail. There are some mores, some laws, some commandments that govern every part of our lives. And Jesus comes and he says now, as he is illuminating for people what it means to be in the kingdom of God, in the reign of God, to be the children of God, he's letting us know there is a new commandment that I am giving to you. I am adding to the list of commandments you've been familiar with, and this one is going to maybe be unfamiliar. We think that because the word is used new. I'm giving you a new commandment, and the new commandment is this, that ye love one another as I have loved you, that ye also love one another. Now, commandments and laws, rules are usually somewhat difficult to keep. Oftentimes, the reason that we have rules and commandments is because they are things that don't naturally line up with our human intuition or tendencies. They are things that don't naturally come easy to us. There's a law on the books about not speeding because folks like me have a lead foot. There's a law on the books about not going through red light cameras because there are folks who feel like if I don't see a police officer and I'm trying to get on time to my meeting, I'm gonna just go ahead and blow through. There are rules on the books for a reason. There are laws, and those laws are to help us to be able to behave in ways that are consistent with the best experience we can have in various areas of life. The rules about our nation's laws are there so that folks aren't able to just live in chaos. The rules about our relationships with one another we've put in place so that we don't disrespect one another. And the rules of the Hebrew Bible were so that the Hebrew children will be able to experience the fullness of God without disrespecting the presence of God. Rules, commands are there for a reason. And Jesus is now adding a new commandment, and he's adding this new commandment seemingly because there's something that we've missed in our keeping of the others. I believe Jesus would not add a commandment. Jesus would not put something else on us if it was not for the purpose of helping us to understand and experience something we've missed along the way. He says, I'm going to give you a brand new commandment. But when he gives a new commandment, it is one that is a little bit confusing. It's not a commandment that seems at first blush to be difficult. It's not a commandment that requires us to do something we can't easily do. It's a commandment that seems intuitive and easy and something that seems like it should be a breeze. The command is that to love one another as God has loved us, that we love one another. The commandment is love, y'all. The command that Jesus gives when he has the opportunity to add, because remember, there are lots of laws already on the books, lots of commandments already there. When Jesus has an opportunity to add commandments, it's interesting to me that he does not add an undue burden to people. He adds that they love one another. Listen here, when Jesus gets to write the law, when Jesus gets to add a commandment, when Jesus, who knows the fullness of humanity, who understands just where the people were, who understands all the sin in the society, who understands all of the shortcomings in the people, Jesus, who knows all of the stuff that's gone wrong, Jesus, who has been accused and will later be accused of blasphemy and have hair ripped from his beard and be whipped to within an inch of his life and then put up on a cross where he will bleed out and have sweat, great drops of blood. Jesus, who will almost thirst to death before he is unceremonially murdered outside the city gate as an example of fear and terrorism to those around him. Jesus has a chance to add a commandment, and the commandment he adds is simply to love one another. When Jesus gets to write the law, when Jesus gets to pass the statute, when Jesus gets to make the decision, he decides this is what I want to add to the commands you've already got. Listen, we've got enough laws and regulations, making sure that your behavior is nice and trying to legislate your morality. He says that what I'm going to add is love one another. That's what I'm concerned with. Jesus says, my new command is love one another, just like I loved you. Well, how, pray tell, did Jesus love us? I'm glad you asked. Jesus loved us in that he came to live and to die for you and for me. And he did not check my sin card before he came into the womb of Mary. But Jesus came as a representative atonement. Jesus came as a perfect lamb. Jesus came to take the punishment and to allow the pardon of my sin. And he did not ask who was going to all be there. You know how when we go to a party, when we go to a cookout, when we go to somewhere, we like to ask, at least I like to ask, who all going to be there? because we don't always want to deal with everybody. We don't always want to have to mess with everybody. We don't know, and so we like to know who all is going to be over there. You've asked the question, you've heard the question asked. Well, I might go, what time y'all leaving? What time you coming back, and who all gonna be over there? Those are my questions anytime somebody invites me to a social event. Jesus does not ask when he comes down in the incarnation, who all gonna be down there? Jesus does not seem to be concerned with only coming for those who are good enough. Jesus does not seem to be concerned with only shedding his blood for those who have earned it, but Jesus comes down through 40 and 2 generations, as my granddaddy used to say, and he gives himself. And when he gets there, he goes to those who do not receive him. Early in Sunday school today, we looked at John chapter 1, and we talked about the fact that the light shined in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. And then we talked about how he went to his own, and his own received him not. Jesus came, the womb of Mary, and Mary had trepidation from the beginning about what it means that this man, but she chose to receive him. She was allowed the choice, y'all, and she chose to receive him and to bear him. And then on top of that, Jesus come down and he goes into the world, and he goes to places like Egypt, and he goes to Bethlehem, and he's in Judea, and he's out in the Decapolis. He goes to all these places, and everywhere he goes, he is rejected just as much as he is accepted. He comes in offering people the choice to choose whether they will choose to have eternal life or not, whether they will be in relationship with him or not. Everywhere he goes, he opens up the door and says, will you receive me? And when it's all said and done, y'all, chapter 13, when he's halfway through his mission and he's closer than he's ever been to, he's closer to death than he is to birth, he's able to institute commandments. And instead of saying everybody needs to worship on the Sabbath, instead of saying everybody needs to study the Torah, commandments he could have issued out. Instead of saying that those who are in power need are now to give a half of what they own to the poor. He says that to an individual, but when he's able to give this command for everybody, he does not say that. When he's able to give a command and he can choose whatever religious, righteous thing he wants to do, he has full power because he is the Son of God. He has what so many of us are vying for and fighting for and turning away from our witness for. He has the power to declare and decree. He has the power to make commands over people's lives. And the command he makes is not do it my way. The command he makes is love one another. Y'all, his concern is that we have love. Isn't it something that his concern is not, I could talk about it. Y'all want me to talk about it? His concern is that we love one another. He wants us to choose to love. And there's something about the example of Jesus, who comes down and who submits himself to being our equal. He does not, Philippians say, grasp power. He does not come trying to overthrow the government so he can force his ideas on other people about what morality is. That's not what Jesus does, y'all. He does not come and he does not go there to Herod's place and say, I am the real king of the Jews, and depose Herod and then sit on Herod's throne and then try to take political power as a way to make sure he grinds into the dust everybody who disagrees with him. No. What he does is he says, my desire is that you love one another. My desire is that they will know you are like me. And how will they know you are like me? It's because you will love each other like I loved you. How did Jesus love us? He loved us in that he gave himself as a ransom for all of us. He did not dice us up into those who were worthy and unworthy. He did not decide that this group could have it and this group could not. He did not say this party is holy and this party is unholy. He did not decide that he was going to side only with this particular part and go against this particular part. His desire was that we would love one another. And what would happen, y'all, if the church lived what Jesus commanded? He said, my desire is that you love one another. I could choose what I want to choose to give you, but the command I give is this, Love. Love. In the incarnation, Jesus has shown love in that he's come down from the heights of heaven. This morning, we've been talking about the eternality and the power of Jesus. Sunday school was all about how Jesus is the second person of the Trinity and how as such he has all power, that there's not a time that he was not, that he's pre-existed, that he's been here from eternity past. And here in first century Judea, Jesus decides to come down to the dusty roads of Israel. He decides to take on a stomach that can hunger. He decides to take on a body that can experience pain. He decides to experience everything we experience. He comes down and gets with us so that we can get with God. He decides to give himself as a ransom for all of us. That is what love looks like, y'all. Love does not look like dictating from the banisters of heaven what folks ought to do. Love is coming down and showing people how they can do. Jesus says, don't just love. He says, love like I've loved. I've already shown you the example. I love that Jesus does not just say, do what I tell you to do. He says, I'm going to show you how to do it. Can I say that there's something more powerful evangelistically about loving people into righteousness than it is just declaring they ought to somehow attain righteousness on their own? There's something about Jesus coming down and getting with us. There's something about the example of Jesus saying, I'll hunger with you so you know what it is to be able to choose to do the right thing. I'll be with you so you know what it is to be able to choose to go the right way. I love that Jesus comes down as an example and he's willing to love and lead us. He does not just stand up in Jerusalem. He doesn't just stand up at the courthouse. He doesn't just stand up in Rome and say what you ought to do. He comes and shows you how to do it. I love this Jesus whom we serve, this Jesus whose love is so true and so real and so deep that rather than making proclamations of what looks moral, he comes and shows us how to live the kind of love that is moral. I love this Jesus. Y'all, I'm not going to preach long today. I've already said everything I want to say for the most part. All I want us to know on this Sunday, this first Sunday of July, this first Sunday of the new part of the second part of the year, what I want us to really take away is that the love of God is such that Jesus shows us how to love. Jesus commands us to love as he loved. And then at the end, he says that love is the only way the world is going to know who's really following me. He says, by this shall all men know that you're my disciples. He didn't say they'll know by what you vote. He didn't say they'll know by how much you tear down people who do life differently. He didn't say you'll know by how much you make sure that everybody who disagrees with you has to pay. He said they will know you're my disciples by loving one another. And how do we love one another? The same way Jesus loved us, the one who came and who gave healing hands to those who were sick and didn't charge any copay. The one who went down to thousands who were hungry and gave them food to eat, didn't ask anybody how many hours they worked that week. The same one who went amongst tax collectors who were seen as traitors and lowest, although the same one who went amongst those who were ceremonially unclean, such that according to the traditional religion of the day, he should have been considered unclean once he went with them. But his love is so great that instead of what the situation he's in making him unclean, he made that thing clean. I love this Jesus whose love is so deep and so real, whose love is so true and so great that he never meets anybody he can't deal with. Jesus, who looks up in the tree for Zacchaeus and says, I know you're a liar and a thief and a traitor, but I'm going to your house. Jesus says, if we love each other the way he loved us, then people will know that we are this. Ain't nobody looking to see what laws we can pass down to show we love Jesus. Don't nobody care how much we talk about people who do things differently. That doesn't show anybody. It doesn't matter how much you applaud and say, oh, we did it now. Jesus says love is what shows the world. The world is not consumed with what they see on the news. That's not what shows them love. That's not what shows them truth. What shows them truth is when we love one another. When we say, you know what? I'm going to make sure that there are diapers and wipes for these children when they're born. That's how we know we're disciples. When we say, you know what? I'm going to make sure that we help to support those who adopt in this state. That's how people know. Listen, I'm going to talk about it without even having to talk about it. That's how people know we are. Ain't nobody come to see you, Otis. That's what I think about when I think about our self-righteousness. Nobody caring about how it's easy to go and cast a ballot in November. Show me what you're going to do on Wednesday night when a child is is without a place to go. Don't just tell me, show me that you love Jesus. And the scripture says, a new commandment I give unto you. And my commandment is not one that is codified in the moral majority. My command is not one that sounds real nice and holy on Sunday morning TV or radio. My command is that you love one another. True love. And so the question ought to be, what is love? Love is what Jesus does. If Jesus did it, it's love. And as we actually pay attention over the next few weeks in our sermons at what Jesus actually did, we'll be able to see that some of us have missed the mark and have convinced ourselves that holiness is about saying something that sounds right as opposed to living what God has done. My brother, my sister, the call of God on all of our hearts is not just to know the word, but to be livers of the word. Not just to use the word as a battering ram against somebody who thinks differently, but to live in such a way that the world is made more full of love and light and joy. Listen, God is calling for those who will say, my desire is to live in such a way that somebody who's on the ground can experience my love through my words and my actions. And at the end of the day, it's not going to force them to do anything. It's going to draw them into doing what God has called them to do. My brother, my sister, the doors of the church are open. Maybe you desire to be in relationship with this God who says, I stand at the door and knock. Choose whether or not you're going to let me in. Maybe you want to be in relationship with this God who says, I put before you life and death. Choose this day whom you will serve. Whatever God is saying for you to choose today, be faithful in listening. Be faithful in listening to the voice of the Lord who is calling us to love one another. Listen, one of the ministries that our church has been able to be connected with is the Expressor of Love Diaper and Wipes Bank. And I love this ministry. Sister Larry Stinson, who spent lots of time in this church growing up and who's still connected as a friend of this congregation. She had a vision to be able to help people who need help. So often we talk about those who have children, but she actually wants to help them. And so what she's decided to do is that she's decided to put together a diaper and wipe ministry, which has had an amazing impact on young families. And my heart is to be able to support people so that they can live a life of dignity. And so listen, maybe you've got some spare money that you want to be able to bless somebody with. Maybe you write a check today, write it out to Expressor of Love and talk to Cynthia Stinson or talk to Larry Stinson or get a hold of me or Deacon Thornton, anybody who can connect you to how to be able to give to that mission. These young people who are, these young and old folks who work together and older folks who work together and who bundle diapers to make sure that young families around our church who don't have enough diapers for the month are able to have them, and wipes as well. And then last month, when there was a formula shortage, they also helped with making sure the source formula actually being the loving arms of Jesus Christ, not just talking, but actually doing something. That's what we can do. Maybe also God is calling you to be a part of the body of Christ in ways that supports. Listen, one of the things I know is that Sister Cynthia Stinson and Sister Sophia Bracey Harris, a number of months back, were having lots of wonderful conversations with me, one-on-one and on Bible study, around ways that we as a congregation can support so many entities that are helping folks to be able to adopt children who do not have help and love and support. That some are called to actually adopt, some are called to foster, and some are called to support the organizations that make it possible. Listen, maybe God is calling you this week to figure out which one of those you're called to. Maybe you have space in your home and space in your budget to be able to foster somebody who doesn't have anywhere else to go, somebody who was born and then neglected. Maybe God is calling you to be the hands and feet of Jesus, to show your love to God's people in those ways. Consider how you can be a blessing.